Imagine finding an undiscovered species of animal for only a single second on camera, just for it to disappear and never be seen again. There are many elusive creatures on Earth, and just seeing them, let alone capturing proof of their existence, is like catching lightning in a bottle. Some hide in the darkest parts of the ocean, and some are only found near an active volcano. These are not beasts from a fantasy movie, but real animals teetering on the edge of existence. These are 6 of the rarest creatures on Earth, one of which I found myself. First up, a shark as dark as the night sky, with rows of teeth like glowing stars. A deep-sea oddity rarely seen by humans, the big-eye sand tiger. This alien shark makes its home in the deep sea where sunlight barely reaches, and the pressure is nearly 10 times of what it is on the surface. It can be found as deep as 3,200 feet below the surface, where few other creatures dare to venture. It is thought that this shark primarily feeds on bony fish and squid. It belongs to the lamniforms order, alongside its notable relatives like the great white shark, salmon shark, and the thresher shark. This weird-looking shark looks very much like your regular sand tiger shark, a species I've worked with a ton in the past. However, it's a black to deep chocolate brown in color, accentuated by its large orange eyes, not the sleek silver predator you're used to seeing. This extremely rare shark is best known from the Atlantic, West Indian, and Pacific Oceans, with a possible worldwide distribution in deep warm waters, but we just don't know. You'd think a giant shark clocking in at 14 feet long would be hard to miss, right? Nope. Believe it or not, the holotype, the very first individual we used to describe and name a new species, was only discovered in 1941 as bycatch by fishermen who were after black scabbard fish. How's that for an unexpected catch? Since then, encounters have been few and far between, with reports suggesting there have only been fewer than 10 sightings to date. One account of a big-eye sand tiger that had been caught alive noted that, quote, it behaved very aggressively, thrashing and snapping violently in and out of the water, as if all sharks wouldn't do that. The last recorded specimen was accidentally snagged by longline swordfish fishermen off the coast of Taiwan in 2019. With such limited encounters, researchers have little insight into its biology and behavior, let alone its population size. Speculations, however, suggest a low population, with commercial fisheries inadvertently catching them on long lines, highlighting the urgency for further study and conservation efforts to protect this rare and mysterious ocean dweller.
Guys, one of the absolute best things you can do in the morning is get out for an early hike, get the blood flowing, get some sun on your skin. And one of the things I love to do after that hike is get some AG1. So this stuff is the best. I'm sure you've heard about it, but it gives you so many essential vitamins, great for your gut health, great for your immunity. It really just keeps you going, especially when you're out and about. And it tastes good too. So really, if you're spending a lot of time outdoors or on the road and you need to feel well and feel like your nutrition is covered, AG1 is the best stuff, so thank you to them for sponsoring this video.
Get your free welcome kit that includes the canister, shaker, and a year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 extra travel packs of AG1.
And you're all set to go, so thank you AG1 for sponsoring this video. Speaking of, let's get back to it.
For our next creature, what if I told you there was an animal so unique, so rare, that it was only discovered in 1992 and has almost never been seen since? Possibly extinct, it is the rarest land mammal in the world. Something like a unicorn. Yeah, you heard me right. Something exactly like that. And it's called the saola, the Asian unicorn. For many years, reports had been coming out of Vietnam of poachers describing this otherworldly, large deer-like animal with large horns and even providing skulls. It was described as a new species in 1992. The saola was first identified as an entirely new genus, meaning no similar animals exist in the world, even though it looks like a deer or an antelope. The saola is actually a bovid, more closely related to cows. It essentially evolved completely in isolation without any close relatives in the Annamite mountain ranges, bordering Laos and Vietnam. The first live saola known to science was captured in a poacher's snare and transported into captivity. Nearly 5 feet tall and weighing up to 200 pounds, the saola has distinct white facial markings, and even more unique are its scent glands, which are on the side of its face, and it uses to rub into trees to attract a mate. The scientific community was shocked. How could such a large mammal go unknown in the modern era? So how did it get the name the Asian unicorn? Well, when you look at the animal from a side profile, the two horns perfectly align and visually merge into one, which gave it the idea that it could be a unicorn. In addition to that, and the fact that it was very rarely seen, whilst also being known for its unusually gentle nature, it's obvious how the nickname stuck. It was undoubtedly the most surprising zoological find of the 20th century. The first saola died only 18 days after her discovery. No autopsy to reveal the cause of death, no remains to send to a museum.
I was lucky enough to meet with the president of the saola working group, William Robichaud, who is the first Western scientist in history to study and observe an alive saola. He told me that a man named General Chang bought it from a poacher alive and kept it in this enclosure. However, it had really bad snare wounds and was in poor condition. As soon as the saola inevitably died, who Bill lovingly named Martha, General Chang and his staff decided to cook and eat literally the rarest land mammal in the entire world.
So, less than 2 weeks after the world learned it existed, the Asian unicorn was no more. And little else is known about this mysterious creature. In fact, it was last captured on trail camera in 2013, and then in 2018, 2019, when my team and I with Extinctor Alive went looking for it in the Annamites, we captured footage of the underbelly of what looked like a large bovid, a saola. Clips like that are not definitive proof of anything. My clip could have potentially been a goat, or who knows, something else, even if deep down I think it was probably a saola. And while 250 may be the number that's floating around by experts, my guess would be there's probably 10 or less of them left in the entire world, if at all. Even though, I will say, in some villages, there are still continued reports of its presence. The saola is severely threatened by habitat loss and poaching, and when visiting some of these remote communities in the region, you can more often than not see a long display of saola skulls hanging on the walls, all kinds of signs of human encroachment into their habitat. It's honestly really, really depressing, especially for such a large, beautiful, and gentle creature. And at this point, the saola's survival is entirely dependent on us increasing conservation work and stopping the spread of hunting throughout the region, and maybe one day finding a small population of this incredible large animal and hopefully saving it before it's too late. Next up, a bird in Brazil of unparalleled beauty that once soared through the azure skies, its call echoing through the grasslands. This is the world's rarest bird, the Spix Maau. With a very restricted range, this beautiful bird was already rare by the time of its discovery in 1819. It was native to Caatinga, a semi-desert habitat in northeastern Brazil. Growing up to about 22 inches long and having a big old wingspan of 11 inches, it is noted by its brilliant pale blue coloration. This beautiful bird's lifespan in the wild remains unknown. The last documented wild male was said to be older than 20 years, while the oldest bird in captivity was 34 when it died. Sadly, the Spix Maau is no longer a common sight in its native habitat. Decades of habitat destruction, illegal trapping, and the relentless march of human development have led to the Spix Maau being listed as extinct in the wild, with the last truly wild Spix seen in the early 2000s. Although, hey, all hope is not lost. There are around 177 individuals in captivity today, serving as ambassadors for their species and symbols of hope for the future. In fact, as of June 2022, a flock of 8 Spix Maau have been re-released back into the wild and appear to be doing great. Another release for 12 more individuals occurred in December of that same year. In fact, I was very, very lucky because 2 of my best friends, Mitch and JQ, actually got to go down there to the site and film the release of Spix macaws back into the wild. Last year, we were treated to the amazing news headline that the Spix macaw breeds in the wild for the first time in 37 years. This is a huge deal because a pair of Spix had hatched 2 chicks in Brazil, representing the first time the species has bred in the wild since the last nest was documented in 1986. That means the last time that Spix macaw were documented breeding and nesting in the wild was before I was born. This just goes to show how incredibly important and effective captive breeding programs in well-accredited zoos can be. And the Spix macaw has a crazy story about how it came back from extinction with this wild dude. He's this rich guy and he collected them and everybody hated him, but he was so passionate about the Spix macaw, and I don't want to tell his whole story, but it is a crazy story. I'm talking gangs, drugs, private jets, the whole thing. Maybe one day we'll do a whole video on it if we can get the permissions, but this guy just went out there and collected these birds by himself as some sort of conservation vigilante and brought them back from the edge of extinction to the point they're at now, where they're actually successfully breeding in the wild. What a great story. This next animal was not only my inspiration for Extinct or Alive, but occurs on a 1,000+ foot high sheer rock face jutting out of the ocean. Its last wild population of a creature once feared extinct resides in total isolation. The rarest insect in the world, the Lord Howe stick insect. Also known as the tree lobster, this bizarre insect is actually a long and thick stick insect that can measure up to 8 inches in length. These insects were once very common on Lord Howe Island, where surprisingly, they were once used as fishing bait. After a supply ship ran aground in 1918, introducing black rats to the island, it ultimately decimated the entire population of Lord Howe Island stick insect. After 1920, not a single insect could be found. A team of climbers visiting Ball's Pyramid, a sea stack 14 miles off Lord Howe Island, discovered a few fresh carcasses but no live specimens. Surprisingly enough, scientists hypothesized that there was sufficient vegetation on this literal rock sticking out of the ocean to support a population of insects. Just to make it clear to you guys, this islet is 1,877 feet high, the tallest volcanic stack in the world. But while searching in the night, they discovered a small population of 24 insects living beneath a shrub. In 2003, 2 breeding pairs were collected and taken to Melbourne Zoo in Australia in an effort to start a captive breeding program to save the species. After initial struggles, the females went on to lay 248 eggs. The entire captive population is descended from these original founders. Just think about it. This stick insect existed nowhere else on the island, but they were found on a huge vertical rock in the middle of the ocean. That is nuts. Right now, over 14,000 individuals have been bred at the Melbourne Zoo, with the 15th generation hatching in 2019. Various, quote, populations of these insects have been transported to zoos around the world to create insurance colonies of this alien animal until a pathway for eventual reintroduction opens up. On Ball's Pyramid, there's only 20 to 30 individuals left in the one remaining wild population. As of today, the extermination of the black rat population on the island is very much underway, paving the way for a day when these amazing insects can once again crawl around Lord Howe Island as they once did. As I said, this incredible story of climbing this stack in the middle of the ocean and finding this giant, quote, tree lobster was the original inspiration for Extinct or Alive for me. I just found that story to be so cool and compelling that I wanted to turn that into its own TV show and conservation adventure. Our next animal holds 2 titles: the world's smallest living cetacean and the rarest marine mammal in the world, the vaquita. This species of porpoise is endemic to the Sea of Cortez. It reaches a max length of up to almost 5 feet and only weighs up to about 150 pounds. The vaquita was first described based on the fact that a few skulls were found on a beach in 1958, but they were only seen for the first time in the flesh in 1985. As the vaquita was only fully described in the 1980s, its historical abundance is virtually unknown. The first comprehensive survey was carried out in 1997 and found that there were only 567 individuals in the wild. That sounds like a lot, but by 2007, the count was down to 150, and today there's as few as 13. As they only give birth every other year to a single calf, they are more vulnerable to extinction as they cannot replenish their population fast enough to exceed the number of vaquitas dying off. Although attempts to capture and house them in controlled environments have been made, vaquitas are highly susceptible to stress. This ultimately leads to severe health complications and even death. It's kind of sad what happened. Basically, we figured out that there's this tiny little cetacean, the vaquita, down in the northern Sea of Cortez, and that their numbers were diminishing rapidly. And a group of wonderful conservationists said, we need to try and save them. So they went down there with a whole lot of funding and a great project with the idea that they would capture vaquitas and breed them in open pen tanks in the Cortez and then reintroduce them. But they were met with all kinds of problems. There's a wonderful documentary called Sea of Shadows that I can't recommend enough that goes into it. And one of the big problems is the fact that the Tortuaba trade for swim bladders has created a mafia around this area. So I'll explain this a little bit. Tortuaba is a giant species of croaker, a fish that gets absolutely enormous, that was said at one time to be so abundant that they would run up the Colorado River like salmon. Well, sadly, in the US, we dammed the Colorado River, and the Tortuaba's numbers started to diminish, along with the vaquita. But then, it was decided at some point that in Eastern medicine, the Tortuaba swim bladder, which is a large air-filled sac, has some sort of Eastern medicinal medicine. This, of course, meant that it had a high dollar value, and now a cartel-controlled industry around fishing for Tortuaba has popped up in the northern Cortez so that they can sell these swim bladders for high dollar value. This is, of course, illegal, and that's why it's controlled by the cartel. Now you have this cartel-controlled fishing instance, and they're putting out these giant gill nets to catch a fish that, you guessed it, is the same size and inhabits the same area as the vaquita. Well, the vaquita, which were already diminishing as we pointed out, are now being hammered by these gill nets, and of course it's not talked about when they're caught because they're caught by illegal fishing practices. This has driven the population all the way down to as low as 13 known individuals. But I will say this, it's not all bad news. That whole story is bad news, but just 2 years ago, it was believed there were only 10 vaquita, and this year there was as many as 13, with 2 of them being freshly born calves. So there is some hope for the vaquita as it teeters on the brink of extinction. Basically, there's 2 choices. One is, as I've said in a previous video that you can check out right here, human intervention is critical to try and save the species. The other, and sadly far less realistic idea, is complete disregard of human intervention. And what I mean by that is governmental and environmental organizations banding together and communities stopping fishing and eliminating the use of gill nets in the vaquita's habitat. The sad reality is, though, we can't do that because those people need to live there. A lot of their livelihoods are made from fishing in the northern Cortez, so on and so forth. So, while it seems impossible to completely leave the northern Sea of Cortez alone for the vaquita to bounce back, there is a glimmer of hope for the species' survival if the right kind of human intervention can take place. All right, guys, before we get into the #1 rarest animal in the entire world, you get to come and help me save some of these rare animals. That's right, there is a giveaway for an adventure to bowfish for invasive flying carp with me this summer in Illinois. All you have to do is like, comment, and subscribe. We'll be picking one winner for an all expenses paid adventure with me. You know you're gonna wanna do it. The rarest animal in the world, an animal of which there is only one known individual of the entire species living today, that was living on a volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that hadn't been seen in over 114 years, believed to be extinct since 1906, that a team and I found in the Galapagos. The rarest animal in the entire world, the Fernandina Island giant tortoise. 15 species of Galapagos tortoise have been identified, and only 11 are believed to remain. The Fernandina Island tortoise is named after the island it comes from. Its shell has a unique saddleback shape with a lip at the front and the back. Prior to our finding in 2019, The only Fernandina Island tortoise on record was found by a scientific expedition in 1906, and it was a male measuring 34.5 inches long. Although it hadn't been seen in quite literally ages, clues had been popping up on the island that defied expectation. Tortoise droppings and cactus bite marks were seen on the island in 1964 and in 2013, and an unconfirmed sighting in 2009. In 2019, I was able to live out my childhood dream, traveling to one of the most remote and inaccessible islands of the Galapagos archipelago in the footsteps of Charles Darwin himself, to hike a live volcano in search of the Fernandina Island tortoise. Fernandina Island boasts the most active and pristine of the Galapagos volcanoes, with nearly 30 recorded eruptions since the 1800s. So after days of hiking for miles through the hottest, most difficult terrain on the planet, this forbidden land gave in, and we started to see the clues pile in. Footprints, fossilized tortoise shell, scat, a bedding site, and finally, deep in a bush, a live Fernandina Island tortoise after 112 years. It was an old female who we lovingly named Fern. Chelonoidus fantasticus was no longer extinct. Measuring around 20 inches and weighing around 40 pounds, she's the only one of her kind, the only living member of her species, literally the rarest animal in the world. But why is she the rarest animal in the world? Why is she the only one of her kind? From what we know, there wasn't really any hunting pressure placed on this animal, and it doesn't have any natural predators, as is the only animal of that size on the island. Could it be that there was a low population to begin with? Is it possible that there were only ever a handful of animals in existence in the first place? Were they driven to low numbers by a large number of volcanic eruptions that occurred on the island, or maybe by early sailors coming by to gobble them up for food? I guess we'll never really know, but it is really fun to think about. Anyway, after we found Fern, after taking very important samples, measurements, and ridding her of parasites, we moved her to the Fausto Lorena Breeding Center in Santa Cruz, where Fern is continuing to be looked after and cared for by the rangers there that were part of the team. She has gained a bunch of weight, she's healthy, she's hydrated, and things are really looking up. Even though we found Fern on this island and the Galapagos National Parks team have conducted, I think, 5 return missions to Fernandina Island since my visit, sadly, they really haven't found any other evidence of any living individuals. And the only trip that ever did really yield any results was the trip that I was on, where I literally dove into the bush and picked up the rarest animal in the entire world, Fern. So it was an incredible find, and my hopes are out there that one day somebody from the Galapagos National Parks or the Conservancy can actually find a male and try and bring the species back. So there you go, the 6 rarest animals in the world. What do you guys think? Do you think we can save some of these species from extinction? Which of these animals were new to you? What other animals do you think deserve an honorable mention as the rarest animals that are out there? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know what animals I should talk about next. See ya!